A very good evening and warm welcome to all the guests, faculty, and all the students present here. Welcome to another insightful Siddhartha Seminar series. Today, we are all blessed to have among us Dr. Dinesh C. Sharma. He is an award-winning journalist, author, and a media trainer in reporting on science and technology, health and environment for national and international media outlets. His latest book, Beyond Biryani, The Making of a Globalized Hyderabad, published by Westman. For his book, The Outsourcer, The Story of India's IT Revolution, published by MIT Press, USA in 2015. He was awarded the prestigious Computer History Museum Book Prize instituted by the American Society for History of Technology in 2016. Another book, India Innovation, Not Jugaad, is about 100 innovations that has transformed India in past 75 years. He has spent a science travelogue witness to the meltdown based on his climate change reporting from the Arctic in 2008. He has been the New India Fellow in 2007 and the Jawaharlal Nehru Fellow from 2020 to 2021. His academic experience includes teaching a course in development journalism for MA students at Manila University, Philippines, and being a teaching fellow at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU. He is a doctorate from Banaras Hindu University and a postgraduate in communication and journalism from Osmania University. He has been the science editor at Mail Today from 2007 to 2014 and founding managing editor at India Science Wire from 2017 to 2019. He is a regular contributor to the medical journal, The Lancet, and among others. Thank you and warm welcome to him.
Thank you for the kind words. Very good evening to all of you. I'm intimidated by the size of the classroom, but happy that I have some familiar faces in the audience. And just before I start, let me make a confession that this is my first visit to IIT Bombay. Though this institution has figured in practically all my books before and interviewed and as a science reporter I've covered whatever is happening here for a number of years. And but this is my first visit, although I've visited several other IITs. And thanks to Anand and Pankaj for making it possible and for this invite to speak to all of you. And another point of relief for all of you, because it's the end of the day. You spend, I'm sure, a busy day in the classrooms and research and what you are doing. So I'm not going to burden you with a PPT. So I'm only going to speak on a few points and then maybe we can have a discussion on interact, and if you have whatever questions you have, I can respond to them. And some of you may be thinking that why are we talking of Hyderabad? I don't know. The topic is there somewhere. Policy, politics, and technology lessons from Hyderabad. Of course, my book is there, so that's the reason I'm here. But why Hyderabad? People have asked me that question, similar interactions and meetings. That why did you write the book on Hyderabad? And why now? Of course, basic answer would be that I am from Hyderabad and I studied there, born and brought up there, but 30 years of my life was spent there. But that alone doesn't make everybody to write a book on the city where you live. And but one of the reasons which took up this project was the fact that there are few things which you see changing rapidly in your own lifetime, a few things which you follow regularly. So that change I was seeing in Hyderabad. And of course, if I had continued to live there, probably I would have not written the book. But I had this advantage of critical distance being away, so I could watch things from a different perspective and see and look for reasons why it is happening. And Pankaj has worked there, so he knows, and some of you would have visited, and maybe you are from that part of the country. So in your own lifetime, you're seeing a rapid change in a city happening. Of course, post-liberalization, many cities have changed, the pace of the cities have changed, and you have all kinds of things happening in the cities. So that apart, it's not a study on urbanization as such, but what was that one single or a few factors which are causing this change? That's what I wanted to see and understand. Is it only the post 91 liberalization story which people always say, okay, it's because of that, the IT has come up, or pharma sector has come up. Is that the only reason, or there are more fundamental and underlying, factors which are being responsible for the so-called Hyderabad story? And I consider it as one of the most striking, stories of modern economic history in India. Because whereas you've seen a new city come up, the Greenfield project, as what we see in Hyderabad. Of course, there were industrial cities, industrial towns, Noida was there, Hyderabad was there, there were good number there. But nowhere in the country, I don't think there's any other example where a completely new city has come up in such a rapid period and dedicated to a particular sector, what you can call the technology sector broadly. You can include pharma and other things also there. So that was another reason that I wanted to look and see how things have happened and what are the underlying factors, and that's why this whole mix of policy, politics, and technology comes in making this story what it is. So those are the reasons I took on this project, and that's what I'm going to talk about in briefly, because it's a long story, because it is not just post 91 as such, but it's a long story. And that's what happens when you start looking at a few things. It goes back, and I started looking at the IT history, which was my earlier book. I thought I'll have the starting point of IBM leaving and IBM coming back. But when I started researching and looking at it, the story got extended to pre-1947 era, when human computers were used by Mahalanobis, and then it decided to replace the human computers with mechanical calculators and things like that. So that's what has happened here. So it's going to be a story of, it has become a story of 100 years. Because if we are talking of so-called knowledge industries, I thought it is necessary to look at what goes into the making of a knowledge city or a knowledge industry, so to say. And for that, one has to look at the knowledge institutions. And so that's what the story goes back to close to 100 years. And any conventional framework, and I don't come from an academic background, but there are set theories for everything to explain, why certain cities become what they are today, or why they grow, why urbanization takes place. But when I looked at some of them, I thought this story doesn't really fit into any of the conventional frameworks, where you say you need a a research university or an R&D center, you need an ecosystem around that, you need policies and you need capital and you need, a market, and then you have a technology city. And the most favorite example we talk about is the Silicon Valley, and there are several other examples. So all those explanations really don't fit into what Hyderabad has to offer. I mean, typically you can say, for example, institutions alone. I will not get into all these parameters. Institutions alone cannot make a city a knowledge city or a center of production. And the best example is IIT Kanpur. And that was one of the first technology institutes to be set up in India as part of the India America project. India America Kanpur project. And it was a 10-year project where the professors came and from 9 Ivy League institutions, they came and they were stationed in Kanpur, and that's how the whole institute developed. So at the end of the 10 years, they wrote an assessment report. The people who were there for all this period. So they gave the progress that how many professors came, journals came, computers came, everything happened. But the end comes the point, the conclusion was that we thought we are going to make an Indian MIT, but not an MIT in India. So that kind of summed up this whole thing, because it was the kind of graduates which they produced were not ready for what India was at that time. So people naturally have to go. So it's a different story that it came handy when, they all became big in the American companies and universities in the 90s, so they could come back. But the whole idea was that to develop an Indian institution, but not an American institution in India. And it didn't lead to any technology development or a cluster development in Kanpur at all. I think Kanpur has contributed in many ways, I'm saying, but if you look at Kanpur city per se, that question is still open at why it did not lead to, technology industry developing in Kanpur. So institutions alone did not make. So like that, all other parameters of this, all these available frameworks we can look at and analyze. So when I look at Hyderabad, there are 3, 4, one can say, turning points, so-called turning points or epochs in this whole journey. And I'm going to briefly talk about them for each of them for say about 5 minutes, and then it will be a broader picture. So basically, if you look at how did the city, which was a princely state, I mean, many of you know that Hyderabad, unlike Bombay, which was under the direct British rule, Hyderabad was a princely state like Mysore, Vadodara, and Rampur, and it was ruled not directly by the British but by the Nizams in the past 100 years. So naturally, the same kind of development of educational institutions, universities in India were founded in after 1857. All the presidencies of the universities, the other institutes got developed. So that kind of a thing did not happen in Hyderabad and to a large extent in Mysore. But what was the parameters when you are saying that capital, research institute, market? But here I am looking at what are the parameters, what are the factors that triggered these changes. There were natural calamities, there were cultural factors, there were political factors, and there were several other factors that led to these changes. So in the 20th century, Hyderabad had a big natural calamity called the Musi flood of 1908. But you think that how did that lead to a change which we are talking today? Because the whole idea here is to connect the past and present and the future are not in silos. And we forget that they are in a different compartment. That's not the case at all. So 1908 flood is a turning point in the making of modern Hyderabad, I feel, because that's when new ideas came to Hyderabad from outside. And as I said, it was a princely state, but British rule was indirect in the sense all major departments were headed by British officers. So The whole idea came up that since this flood has devastated and flattened almost 40% of the city, why not build it in a different way? So that itself was a new idea to a laid back, cozy moonlight city at the turn of the 20th century, when the word of Nizam was the law. So they were still living in that era, but this whole idea came from outside that why not rebuild in a new way. And that's when research area was called in to advise Nizam's government. And remember, Visvesvaraya, when he came to Hyderabad, that was his first assignment after he had left his job in Bombay presidency. He was the chief engineer here. He took premature retirement and he was in holiday, so it's called back. So that's a different story. But this whole idea that we should have a technical expert from outside come and advise the government was a new thing for a princely state, because only a few weeks back in 1908, the Nizam had gone and worshipped. That's a famous story that he worshipped this river and, at the advice of the Hindu priests, and river receded. So from that point to calling a technical advice and injection of scientific ideas, and Vishwesvaraya came and explained, gave a scientific explanation of why the flood had occurred, because there was a massive, there was almost like a extreme weather event for 2 days, and the tanks burst and the water flew into the river and it became big flood in the city. So and he gave a flood protection plan, and also because they just returned from, see how the ideas flow, modernization or globalization or whatever you say, is a thing of ideas flowing. Vishwesvaraya, he was a technocrat and he served for a number of years, but he had spent 4 months in Europe visiting all the cities, all the major capitals, and what we saw there that all of them had something called a riverfront. They had beautiful buildings along the rivers and almost the civic centers built around all the ornamental buildings. So when he came to Hyderabad, he suggested that let's build these 2 dams, and so that the water doesn't go to Hyderabad. So that was a technical advice, but he gave another advice to the government of Nizam that why don't you develop the riverfront, the construction of a wall along the river, and you construct these beautiful buildings, what we have seen in Europe. And he says that he was greatly influenced by what we had seen. So from a deeply, closed city, Hyderabad almost started imagining itself as a European city, that will have the beautiful buildings along the river. What are those buildings going to be? And most of the princely states had this concept of, they were trying to compete in some ways with what was happening in the presidency, without a lot of institutional things, like they would construct, if you go to Vadodara, a lot of old princely era buildings are huge, ornamental. So what were they? They were having a pension office in that, they were having an archive in that. So even ordinary looking buildings had to be, ornamental and huge and monumental. But when Vishwesvaraya suggested that you develop a riverfront in Hyderabad, he said you have important buildings. Then those are not just the buildings, but the institutions. For example, educational institutions, the city college was set up, Usmania General Hospital was set up, which is right now under a big controversy whether the old building can still survive. So it was not just the new building of Usmania General Hospital, but a whole, modern medicine came. The Unani Hospital didn't have a full-fledged building, but Usmania Medical Modern Allopathic Hospital had a full-fledged building. So that came, and the High Court was set up. So all these were not just the monumental building, but institutions which were reformed. Judiciary existed, but when a new building was constructed, all the courts were reorganized, and that's how it happened. So that first, arrival of new ideas happened because of the flood. And the second wave, which immediately followed, was the First World War, and then, as we know, that all over British territories, there was a need for industrial labs to be set up to help the war effort, and that's how the industrial labs were set up in both Mysore as well as in Hyderabad. And they are very well connected. The projects go in parallel. What was the objective of an industrial lab? Again, it's a British officer who suggested that the revenue head of the revenue department. So he looked at the accounts and it said that Hyderabad is, having so much of sugarcane production. It has been imported to British India, exported to British India, and we are importing sugar. There's so much of leather, you're exporting hides and importing leather. So what he meant was that, why not develop industries based on your own raw material? And for that you need processes. So that's how the industrial lab was set up in 1918, which eventually becomes CLSIR in Hyderabad and becomes a part of CSI. So that is the chain of the industrial research. Again, triggered by a war, but it goes beyond war. Like they produce this acetone from mova flowers, which went into making this fire for the World War. For the British Allied forces. So like that, it was set up for a particular purpose, then the trajectory takes off. So that was another wave of new ideas. So that was the first half. And then of course, Usmania University, it's a whole chapter in my book, how come, and the whole idea that there can be a full-fledged university teaching in a native language, where the medium of instruction of Urdu was itself is new. How did that idea occur to a princely state when everybody was going in for education in the English medium, which was the language of the British institutions all over the country? So they wanted to, there were some thought that let us look for a non-British model, and there were scholars not who were not native who came from Aligarh, and all these people are coming from, constantly coming like Visheshara came. There were several others who came. Like Syed Ross Masood was one, he was grandson of Sir Syed, who founded Aligarh Muslim University. So he was an educator who was educated in Cambridge, and he was a student of Ian Foster, and that's how he inspired his passage to India, partly. So he went to, even Visheshara was sort of influenced Ross Masood's thought that why not look at Japan as a model. So Ross Masood goes to Japan and spends 4 months and studying the whole education model right from kindergarten till technical education, how they are teaching medicine, engineering in the Japanese language, and he produces this whole report that including the methodology of how the technical terms need to be translated into how they are doing in Japanese, and why can't we do the same in Urdu, like how do you write when you teach chemistry in Urdu, how do you write the science and the formulae, or when you're teaching math, do you write the same science which you do in English? So all that, there was a methodology which the Japanese are following, and these people try to adopt it. That's how Usmania University becomes a school, university teaching in Urdu medium. It had its own challenge, and it translated everything from philosophy to mathematics into native language. So that's how the new ideas came, new technologies came. They had to develop fonts for printing those textbooks. So that's how the first nostalgic, the Urdu script was made, metallic script, metallic fonts were made in Urdu. Of course, it was very costly at that time, it used to cost huge. But at least the technology was there. So like that, it enriched Urdu language itself. There's a separate study which I'm not an expert on that, but it enriched. There was a science magazine in Urdu brought out by Anjuman Historically Urdu. So it enriched. It added new words. This whole translation project added to the Urdu language. So that was another way. And of course, the Second World War, I'm not going to touch much, but as I said, a lot of these factors which are not conventional. One factor is the geography. I mean, why did so many institutes move to Hyderabad? Because it was a geographical location. We tend to forget that conventional frameworks will not look at it that way, because it was away from the border, it was centrally located, and one could reach different parts of the country with not much of a issue. So that was a reason. For example, a national the nutritional research lab, which was in Pune, and when it was thought that Pune didn't have any hospitals to do clinical research in nutrition, it was set up in the 1920s or even before that. But around 40s, when this A.V. Hill report was prepared to review the organization of science in India, they said, why not locate it to a place where you also have access to hospitals, where we do nutritional research, clinically. So we needed hospital beds. So obviously, Kunur was in southern India, so they wanted to move it to Chennai, but there were some administrative issues, so it moved to Hyderabad. So geographically, and also this institution, why did the NRL come to Hyderabad? Because there was Usman General Hospital which was willing to give a certain number of beds allotted to for clinical research. So these kinds of interconnections happen partly because of geography. Then in the 60s, I'm jumping to the 60s, when a lot of defense lab moved to Hyderabad. Why? Because it was away from the border. Strategically, so it was important that it is not approachable. Like several labs which are in Delhi, they have moved to Hyderabad. So that's how the whole defense establishment. So the ecosystem started developing because of various organizations. So that explains one of the key parameters, key factors for knowledge development is a critical base of knowledge distribution. So that's developed in the first half of 20th century till about 1950 or so. So that is the number one point which I wanted to mention. The second turning point or a critical input into this whole story was, again, which is neglected by many kind of discourses, is the role of public sector unit. They are always taken as, we always look at VHL, ITPL, ECL as loss-making units, they have nothing contributed, and especially today, they are being closed left, right, and center, and that's been on for a number of years. But what we forget is they were the institutions which triggered a lot of development of what we see today, and that happened in Hyderabad in two cases majorly. One is the founding of IDPL. I don't know how many of you would have heard or seen, read something about IDPL. Anybody? Not many, okay. So IDPL was one of the pharmaceutical public sector units making drugs and pharmaceutical, Indian Drugs and Pharmaceuticals Limited, IDPL. So it was set up in the 60s as a nation building project because, again, why were these institutes set up? Not just because we wanted to have institute, but they had to serve a purpose. The purpose was that because 90% of the medicines used in India in 1947 or around that time were all imported, and it was all the multinational corporations which were importing that and selling in the different brands in India. So it was India did not have a pharma industry. Today it may look odd to say that from that stage to a stage where we are saying that we are supplying drugs and vaccines to third world and all over the world. So we are the pharmacy of the world, so to say. But how did we become that? So somebody thought at that time that we need to invest in making pharmaceuticals in India. So this project was set up, antibiotics project was set up in HCL and Hindustan Antibiotics Limited and ITPO. But the technology for that came from USSR. Again, there were several geopolitical factors that why USSR and not European. Of course, negotiations did take place with European companies. The MNCs which were operating in India wanted to set up, but in India, but not without technology. Whereas USSR was willing to give you technology for political reasons, because of the beginning of the Cold War and post World War II, and everybody wanted to leverage their economic strength, and that's how we said, okay, we'll go ahead with USSR, and there were 3 units planned. So one of them was to manufacture bulk drugs in Hyderabad was chosen. But the Soviet technologies were not perfect, neither the processes nor the industrial processes nor the chemical processes to make the drugs were not very perfect. And technology transfer was having a lot of hiccups, so a lot of things had to be done in Hyderabad, and that forced them to have a large R&D unit. So we needed to perfect those the chemical processes to make these molecules, and also develop an industrial process in pilot plant. So therefore, IDPL had a large R&D unit, which had maybe 150 people working for it and producing drugs in small batches using different processes. People went to Russia and everything and came back and all that technology transfer was happening. But we have to perfect our own. We are forced to do R&D on our own, and that's what IDPL did. That the very location of IDPL, it was a political decision. The Russian consultants who had come to India to look at site, they said, you set it up in Visakhapatnam, not Hyderabad, because Visakhapatnam is closer to the sea, so you can let away the pollutants, the waste materials into the sea. There was no pollution control laws, so the easiest thing was to be near a water body so that you can just release the pollution, the effluent into the sea. But it was a political decision because they wanted to develop this part, the Telangana part, so the government decided no, we have it. So it was against the technical advice, it was set up in IDP in Hyderabad. So, but that became a positive thing for Hyderabad because this R&D unit was there. And ecosystem of the raw material suppliers and people who did the various things for IDPL developed. But what the R&D unit did was something great because it trained a lot of people. And where did these graduates come from? There were only three universities offering a degree or some kind of a course in pharmaceutical. One was BHU, another was the Andhra University in Georgia, third was UNDT and UNDCT in the Chemical Technology Department of the Bombay University. These were the three places. So all these people came from there, and they were, most of them were trained in these institutes, and they were working in R&D. And some of them learned the tricks. They developed. There was a list of molecules, essential drugs, antibiotics, and malaria, and all these things were the processes were developed. So when IDPL could not manufacture, IDPL had typical other problems, but I'm only looking at the cultivation of IDPL as an R&D part of it. So all these people learned the techniques and they came out and started their own industry. That's how I'm putting it in a very short way, that's how the pharma sector, what you see today as Hyderabad is known for pharma sector, that's how it develops. Because single most contribution of IDPL is this R&D, training people, making them learn how to develop processes for existing molecules. Can you guess which is the company, $1 billion company, the founder was working in the R&D of IDPL? Any guesses? Yeah, they are. So Kanji Reddy was one of the few people who were working in the IDPL, and of course he started several companies and then ultimately started not only him, there were foremen, there were assistants, if you map, it would be an interesting story and study to do. If you map the lineage of the top 10 pharma companies, top 10 billion dollar pharma companies in Hyderabad, they all linked to IDPL. People were in Anji Reddy's lab, they left Anji Reddy, then they started, there were some foremen, there was a production manager, there was a marketing guy. So all of them are connected to it. It's an amazing tree. Like the TIFR is the mother of so many institutions, one can say. So same way, IDPL is the mother of so many pharma sector. So that's the second part I wanted to say. The third one would be more, it kind of connects with the other branch of the what technology in Hyderabad is today, about the information technology, software services, and now we are talking of services. How did that start? So again, like the Anchor Institute, the Anchor Center for Pharma is IDPL, the Anchor institution for IT and the technology sector is the ECIL, and bunch of institutes are the ECIL, CMC, that is Computer Maintenance Corporation, and Administrative Staff College of India, which was a new discovery for me, that how come Administrative Staff College of India has a role in software skills? Because the whole point, the question which I wanted to address was how did we learn the skills? Of course, IBM was there for a long time. ICL was there where people were trained in mainframes and mini computers and all that. Because the computer science and engineering courses in IIT started much later. Of course, computers came in IIT Kanpur. Bombay had the Russian mints. So they were there, but the BTech and MTech courses came much later. Courses were taught, industry people came and used these big computers in IITs. So they served a different purpose. IIT Kanpur, the computer center was used by DCM and so many other companies like one NTIF. But the courses came much later. So my question was that how did people learn? So it was on the job, and one of the institutes which played a major role was ECIL, Electronics Corporation of India Limited. Again, it's a politics, it's the geography and policy all come together in the formation of ECIL. ECIL was conceived in Bombay. It's a part of Department of Atomic Energy. Because again, how come a nuclear energy department is getting into electronics? It was necessity that they had to develop nuclear electronics. If you wanted to do your set up a ingenious power plant nuclear reactor, you needed that because it was strategic. Nobody would give those things away. Of course, they went to Philips and Philips gave a quotation which is bigger than the cost of the nuclear reactor just to supply the electronics. So Baba and Menon and others thought that let's do it indigenously. That's a long story that how did that electronics production unit develop in Bombay. And then it became so big because it was supplying to army, it was supplying to so many other things, and they thought let us have it a separate unit, make it a public sector unit. That's how 300 people working in Bombay were translocated to Hyderabad to set up ECIL. It was a political decision. There were strikes here, and there were chief ministers writing letters saying that how come you are moving 300 people, taking away all their jobs. So that political thing was there. But of course, it was a technical decision that we needed. Why did Hyderabad was chosen again? It's a strategic location, so-called salubrious climate for electronics production work. You needed, not you needed to be away from a coastal, area, and you could employ more people. There was a room for expansion there. It was not possible for them to expand in Bombay. So all those factors, non-technical but very important factors played, came into play to take ECIL, formation of ECIL in Hyderabad. And it did exactly the same thing what IDPL did to the pharma sector. So many people came out and ancillaries developed, startups. That time we didn't call startup, they were called small scale industries. So a lot of people came out of ECI and started and then ECI set up a mainframe in Administrative Staff College of India because ECI also wanted to do software. So that's how they set up in the staff college and at one time it had the largest number of software people working in Administrative Staff College of India. And out of that so many people came, which I talk about, and they started their own companies. And Administrative Staff College of India decided to close the unit and the software development work and wanted to go. But that developed a lot of skills, not only software writing. See, imagine that it's an era when there were restrictive policies or imports were difficult. They wanted to cannibalize whatever system you have. That's what these people did in the initial days. That you have a peripheral like a printer or a disk drive from one company. You have a used mainframe from some other company, from IBM or ICL. Why not integrate them and work them? That's how the Indians could handle any kind of computer system in India because they were forced to do that. If you couldn't import, it was so high, the import duties, there were restrictions. So that's what came to be known as systems integration. There was a particular unit, there was a project called System Integra where they put together, different systems and made it work. And that led to, although it also needed one particular software to work on another system, you needed a kind of a bridge language to work on that. So that's how the skills started developing that you could handle to work on any system. And it became a very big advantage when Y2K came because many of those Y2K non-compliant programs were written by people working in ECIL and several other IBM and several other companies. So that's how the skill set developed. And so the same story what uh, the IDPL did for pharma, ECIL did for, and CMC. I'll just again lot of happenings happened. Why did the CMC decide to set up in Hyderabad? It has a link with IIT Bombay. It's an interesting story because, of course, Department of Electronics was based here in Bombay, and but they wanted to set up the computer maintenance corporation because IBM was leaving, and they were looking for somebody to, you know, look after this new company. So one graduate, he did his post-graduation here, Ramesh Jhunjhunwala, in the 60s. Then he went to IBM and he was working in UK. And there was Professor Isaac here, Department of Computer Science Department. And he had worked on the Russian computers. And while Jhunjhunwala was here, he had also developed some software and programs for that. So he had knowledge of the Russian computer, but he was working in IBM in UK. So when he came back and he wanted to return to India, he came to see Professor Isaac here in IIT Bombay. So he suggested that this new company is being set up. Why don't you go and meet Professor Narasimhan, who was in TIFR, who developed the first TIFRAC. I don't know how many of you would have heard that. The TIFR automatic calculator he developed in Bombay at TIFR. So Jhunjhunwala went to see Professor Narasimhan, and he directed him to Mr. P.P. Gupta, who was going to be the managing director. So he asked, and they got chatting because they knew each other, but because both of them were in UK. And so he said, why don't you join this new company as we are going to start for maintenance work. So Jhunjhunwala said, I'm not interested in maintenance work because he had worked in the core systems in R&D in IBM UK. He said, I'll do something more than maintenance. So then he said, Gupta said that we'll set up an R&D unit for you. But there was no, that was the first recruitment being made by CMC. There was no other employee. And it was headquartered in Bombay, but it had not been decided where something will eventually be set up. So the condition which Jhunjhunwala said that I don't want to go anywhere north of India. So Gupta said, okay, why don't you go and see? He was from Wardha, Jhunjhunwala was from Wardha. He said, why don't you go and see Hyderabad? So he went to Hyderabad, saw it, he liked it, and he reported to Gupta saying that, okay, I'm ready to join. So he said, okay, we'll set up R&D unit in Hyderabad. So that's how the first employee of CMC R&D was Ramesh Jhunjhunwala, and he started this company, this whole setup in Hyderabad. And one of the amazing things, one of the very first few years, the application to come out of CMC Hyderabad, the R&D unit was something which all of us use, is the computer reservation system. And before internet, how do you computerize the railway reservation system? And when people didn't have personal devices, so nobody owned a PC or forget about phone, nobody even used a PC. So that's a perfect example of thinking of an application for a so-called e-government. The word was not even coined at that time. For a public utility, to make use of technology for a public utility, when the ownership of device is not on the user. But still it made a huge difference. It was a massive, and nobody had attempted such a system anywhere in the world. They studied Canadian system, they studied American system. Nobody had this kind of a complexity, this kind of a railway system with so many reservation categories, so many ways to, and there were 150 categories at that time, it seems. And CMC was given the manual, that this is the physical manual, you convert all this into the software, and they did that. So that was a typical application, and how they did was again very innovative from a technology development perspective, from a societal perspective, that 1984 was declared by anti-computerization year by all the national trade unions in India because computers were being used, were just being introduced in banks, so they all went on this thing, strike and many places, and they declared the whole year we are going to oppose this use of computers in banks. They are very rudimentary computers, they're not even a customer interface involved, only the back end was to be done by RBI and others. So still national trade unions were opposed to it. So in such an atmosphere, when CMC started working on railway reservation, they thought, okay, first we have to address this problem whether what we develop will be used by railways at all or not. So for that, what this bunch of people led by Walla and all other people thought was that let us employ trade unions right from the day one. Instead of developing the system and telling them you use it, we call them and learn from them. Because they were not the railway employees, they didn't know how the railways work. So what Walla and others did, they used to go to the stations, sit with the people, learn how the physical in the reservation in the physical world is made. And then they call these people, okay, explain them this is what we are doing. And at the end of the day, how do you calculate your money? They say we sit down in a ledger and calculate and see how much money was, which train had and all that. And it takes how much time it takes. They said they would say it took 6 o'clock duty or that, and by the time they finish it is 8 o'clock. So they said, okay, if we do this, you will accounts will be settled at 6:10 or 6:15 or 6:20. So they saw the value. They call the trade union leaders stationed in CMC R&D. Imagine that the technologists went out of their way to see that what we are developing is not only so-called user-friendly, but also it will be accepted. So that's I would say, a novel way of developing a public technology or a technology for a public utility, and that succeeded. There was no opposition in the railway. I think that was the only organization in the 80s when they introduced computerization. There was no strike, nothing happened, and they got several other things. It's a non-technical thing that okay, you get to wear a different dress, you sit in an air-conditioned room. So people are mind that they have a computer wali job पे बिठाएंगे, not in the physical section. So it kind of created a new, interest among the employees. The railway clerks were so happy, and they held a party for them and they called them. So and they learned from them. They were pets, all those things are there. That तुम ये develop करके दिखाओ हम आपको इतना वो देंगे, that kind of thing. Some would be challenging scientists, this technologies that okay, can your system do this and they'll do that and so that kind of a interaction with the user community was there. I mean, it's not a typical things which we see many times today is solutions chasing problems in the technology world. It was the other way. It was a different way of solving the problem. So that's what. So these are the three. Then underground, with software developers, CMC networks for the underground, and how things work is when this team came to. I mean, imagine for a company, a British utility to come to India. And India of 1980s was not what India is today. We have a different image. We have, people know that okay, something is happening in technology world in the past 20, 30 years. But 80s it was not the case. And the only images which you would see was the boom images, the globally that was which was the pre-internet, pre-social media era. So what at that time was underground to give a project to CMC itself was a miracle. Of course, there was a how it came is a different story. So when this team came to Hyderabad to visit CMC, see how the the culture of a company also adds to what the company or organization do. Is CMC was a different type of company within the public sector, if you know. It had a different work culture, it had a different hierarchy, it had a different way of treating its employees. CDOT and CMC at that time were so-called, different kinds of public. CDOT, of course, and to introduce here, if you put them into this culture, that there will be get-togethers of employees, there will be, people going on weekends together, picnics, and all employees were involved in a different way. They had a fancy campus in Hyderabad. So when this London Underground team came to talk to CMC people, and this Employees' Day was being celebrated. So there were kids, so there were 400, 500 people on the campus, and they were impressed with this kind of work culture. So here is a public sector company owned by Government of India, working in a different way, and of course the technology part was there, what they have done in the region. So that kind of gives in the contract. So these are the three examples which I have given, the three landmarks, and there are several others. So just to show that there are factors other than what we normally think contribute to the making of a technology city, how the skills develop. It's not that you have a university, you have a incubation center and things will happen. No, it will not happen. Still, that is not the question. If you try to, I mean, very recently somebody made a very high ranking public official made a comment that, okay, let's build Silicon Valley in India, government is ready to build buildings and do whatever you want. It is not just the buildings, the fancy buildings can wait. I mean, CMC of course had a fancy building, that's a different issue, but that alone was not the contributing factor. It had some so-called smart buildings in the 80s and 90s in Bombay and several other places. So that is not the only factor. The cultural factors come, how you work ethics come into play, how personal communication comes into play, and how these different, extraneous things which make. So policies help. The software technology park was a landmark policy. I mean, you couldn't have reached that inflection point without a software technology park scheme. It was again an innovative policy. It was not the export processing zone policy being applied to software. Needed a different kind of a craft. So all these things come together and make cities what they are today. So the title is I'm supposed to give some lessons from Hyderabad. So because people ask them, what do we learn from this whole story of Hyderabad? So one is obvious that there is a very strong role of the state and the public institutions. I have given you so many examples of what the state intervention is done, critical point. It's not, I mean, people would like to project the private sector industry that is state has been an obstacle in India's, developing what the state values. No, state has played a very critical role. Public institutions have played a very critical role in so many sectors, but particularly the technology. Interventions like patent law, it was a political decision to make it, the move from product patent to process patent. That changed the face of this industry in the 71. That was a all through the 60s we had this debate about how we change patent law. But yes, a political decision was taken that we will allow patenting of a new process of an old product. That changed the pharmaceutical ceiling. And of course, it forced the centers like NCL and RRL to develop processes for registry. That's how we have been the cheapest HIV drugs into the world. And it is not a small contribution. It is not very people say, okay, they are making duplicates and generic medicines. It is to develop a drug, a new process for an existing molecule is not a small task. You need an industrial process, you need to test it, you need, differently. It's not just a process on the paper. It needs to be translated into industrial process. And one single thing contribution of this whole thing is they change the course of the HIV pandemic in the world. I mean, today HIV is on a downturn. We don't hear of HIV what we hear in the 90s and 2000s. Why? Because India could supply this secret from India. So let us not undermine the role of public institutions, public research lab. It is not just help India, it is a global impact. And CDOT is another area which I am not touched in this book, but I will tell about it earlier. How it has changed the global communication whole of Africa. Developing world. So the cheapest technology and a deliberate government decision to give it free, license it free to any number of people who wanted to use CDOT technology. A public institution developing a technology using public money, giving it free to private sector. Why? Because they wanted to break the monopoly of the MNC. So that's how CDOT became famous and it changed the face of global communication. So the role of public institutions, policies, the technology development board. I mean, the biotech industry should be thankful to technology development board for funding the two first biotech companies in India. Not just finance, do not loan, you are given grants. Both Bharat Biotech and Kanta Biotech, the first products were fully grant supported by Government of India through technology development board. Imagine till 2022, still, I mean, if you look at the people are getting grants, not loans from technology development board. Every second biotech company in Hyderabad has that. Sometimes it is running into 100 crores also. Not 5, 10, 15 crores. One company got 100 crore grant because the certain vaccines had to be manufactured and bringing it to pre-teaching facility. So the role of public sector, the public institutions is still valid. It is not gone away. We don't talk about it much. So Hyderabad has that this whole story of that lesson. Look at the latest example of AI mission. Why are we spending 10,000 crores? To create a public infrastructure for AI development which private sector can use. So again, it is the same STP model that you create this what you call GPUs, which you know that the computing facility which application developers can use. So the role of state is still there, very strong. So that's the thing. The second lesson which we can learn from Hyderabad is continuity in the political support and public policy. So there has not been any letdown. See, Hyderabad has undergone many changes. So it was part of Nizam state, capital, then it became Hyderabad state between 48 to 56. In 56 to 2014 it was capital of Andhra Pradesh. 2014 to now it has become capital of Telangana. So it has undergone a lot of political, it's politically its status has been changing. Several parties came to power, TDP came, Congress came and now we are. But there's been continuity of political support. Barring some cosmetic changes here and there, the political support for what they want to do to the city in terms of the technology, in terms of incentives, nothing has changed. But that has played a major role. And of course, we talked about Usman University, we talked about industrial lab. So the building of and nurturing of public institutions for knowledge creation. Again, that's a number of such examples I can give. ISB, you all heard of Indian School of Business. But how many of you know that it was to be set up in Bombay before it went to Hyderabad? So the first proposal, obviously all the funders of ISB were all the big businessmen sitting in Bombay. So the first choice was IIM has gone to Ahmedabad. Again, if you look into the history of IIM, they wanted to set up in Bombay, but there was no land available, so it was set up in Ahmedabad. And of course, Sarabhai had a different idea. So, but ISB was also supposed to be set up in Bombay. Land was identified in Navi Mumbai. But then the proposal being finalized, it is all in public domain, it is not my discovery, that it went to public figure of the day. And he said that we should have 30% reservation for Maharashtra. So it was supposed to be a privately funded university and trying to be like Harvard Business School and and whatnot. So if they wanted to have 30% reservation, this political figure suggested. So it was stuck down at that point. And this news appeared in Economic Times that ISB is facing problems in Maharashtra. And it was led by a proactive chief minister in Andhra Pradesh, Chandrababu Naidu, his office. He said, call them here tomorrow. So all the ISB board or whatever the committee was there, it was called. They were shown this land. So it became. Of course, they did their due diligence or whatever, and ISB went to Hyderabad. So it is political decision, it is whatever you can call it, aggressive marketing, but institutions are important. So the creation of knowledge institutions, like Triple IIT Hyderabad is another example, a new way of creating an institution. We have this industry-funded schools. It wanted to be called the Indian Institute of Information Technology, but MHRD said you cannot use Indian in your name because it is not funded by the government, central government. Only then you can use Indian. So they made it international. But it was a novel way of creating an institution. So creation of knowledge institutions is important, and that still remains valid. The fourth lesson from Hyderabad is a cultural lesson, because very often the models, if you look at, undermine, the role of culture. Is the city welcoming? And Hyderabad was perhaps the only multicultural, multilinguistic state in 1948. I mean, the Marathi, Kannada, Telugu, Urdu, and Hindi, all these languages were spoken, because part of Marathi speaking regions were in Hyderabad, part of Kannada speaking region were in Hyderabad. So it was a multicultural and multilinguistic state, and that DNA still remains in Hyderabad. If you've been to Hyderabad, you know that. And for a knowledge and technology based city where there's constantly, movement of, you need a technical pool, no? You need a critical mass of technically trained, people. So, and that atmosphere needs to be conducive. They don't need to be only local people, the people coming from all over, and that's what is a big cultural factor. I think that's a big advantage. One can manage with multiple languages in Hyderabad and multiple cuisines and all that. So that has played a big role, and you don't feel outside when coming in. So that's what I understand. So these are the few observations, if you can call lessons. I don't know. But yeah, it's taking a lot of time. So and stop here. And if there are more questions, there are questions, please ask and comment. And for more, please read the book. It's available online and not whatever. So, yeah, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. My name is Utkarsh. I'm a policy student here in Center for Policy Study. So thank you for this wonderful talk. I like you broadened all the areas how Hyderabad became modern day tech city, right? From establishing the narrative of Hyderabad, like how it used, and then you shifted towards how policy and politics work together. So my question is fragmented a bit, but I would like to ask you, how did policy continuity across different governments, as you mentioned, contribute to Hyderabad overall growth? Like, were there moments when, like, you started where policy shifts posed a risk? And Hyderabad, like IT boom, is attributed to its early adoption of IT specific policies like high tech city. But in most cities, like especially in northern India, like Lucknow or like in central India, Bhubaneswar, Bhopal, we see the problems of like regulatory frameworks like land acquisition, FDI, taxation reforms. So how did it shape its long-term investment plan in Hyderabad?
Yeah, you mentioned a number of points, in which I'm happy some of the things which I missed you pointed out. Land is a big advantage which Hyderabad had. Again, this is something which we tend to ignore. Why did ECIL go to Hyderabad? Was availability of government land. And when they started looking for land for ECIL, they found it is big enough that let us set up NFC also, nuclear fuel complex, 2 units of Department of Atomic Energy. And why did this so much of land around Hyderabad become available? You go back to the Nizam's period. There's something called crown land, sarf khas. There were Zagindari land. There were three kinds of land. So the sarf khas lands were all around Hyderabad. So after 48 and then this takeover of Hyderabad, integration of Hyderabad, the sarf khas lands became Government of India lands, and then ultimately they passed on to AP government. So when Andhra Pradesh was formed in 1956, a huge land bank was available with the government of Andhra Pradesh around Hyderabad. So therefore, most of the PSUs went to Hyderabad for land. Easy availability of land. Can you imagine ICRISAT, the Internship for Research Institute of Engineering Tropics, from from MS Swaminathan committee, there was a committee, they approved, they identified Hyderabad as one of the places. From that point to foundation laying, it just took 3 months. It's a huge land. If anybody has seen Ikrisat, it's a massive area of land. That was possible only because there was they were all crown. So that it is a big factor. Then as regards policies, it matters in the sense that suppose, I mean, again in today's context, it's very critical that one government is there in the center and another party is ruling in the state, so you have a lot of center-state issues. So while one party ruled both Andhra Pradesh and the central government, the decisions could be taken fast. That again, it's a political factor. It did matter. Why did Chandrababu Naidu move so fast in the late 90s, between 96 till 2001? He could do so many things. And that was the period when he was a key partner in the central government. So he did not have to wait for a permission from Ministry of External Affairs to visit America or to Japan. He could go anywhere because he was part of the central government. So it matters. At the policy level, the political level, all these issues are there. And as regards some of the North Indian cities, see, triple IITs were set up at 4 or 5 places. 2 of them were Gwalior and Allahabad. Hyderabad and Bangalore were set up around the same time. And you see the difference where they are and that you are. Because you need the whole system. As I said, you can't transplant an institute somewhere and you imagine miracles happen. It doesn't happen.
Hello, sir. Myself Joy Mandi. I am a PhD student here. I just wanted to ask regarding the establishment of Osmania Hospital because of the Mosi flood. But around the same time, there were other hospitals that were set up. There was Grand Medical College and various other group of hospitals which was set up way before.
Which one? Sorry.
JJ,
Yeah.
which was set up around 1845. So Osmania playing a key role for the medical sector to boom. Is that the only reason? Because there were other old hospitals too.
That was not the only reason. I just gave that an example of creating a critical base of knowledge institution. That was important. So, and in fact, Usmania existed before the flood. The new building which came up in a big way, it was called Abdul Hospital, and that's another phase of that. Ronald Ross worked in Hyderabad. He did his malaria research in Hyderabad, for which he won the Nobel Prize a few years later. So, but what was important was that this creation of an infrastructure that was critical. I mean, one can't say that pharmaceutical industry developed only because of Usmania General Hospital, but for example, NRL, the nutrition lab, came to Hyderabad because it was provided certain number of beds, and that could be provided because it had an infrastructure. That way.
So out of all these,
No. Go ahead.
so out of all these factors, land is probably the first had a lot of advantages on similar lines. Bombay had a lot of advantages when you compare it with Hyderabad. A lot of institutes came in, hospitals came in. Then why Hyderabad had that advantage? Because I saw Hyderabad. Hyderabad has incredibly developed, and it is really incredible because I went there. There is a lot of patchwork, road patchwork that's happening in Mumbai, but on the contrary, Hyderabad has excellent roads. So why is it that Hyderabad had that advantage?
No, that's what I said. It's not one factor, it's a multitude of things, continuity, institution, people, personality, a lot of things matter. I mean, of course, you cannot compare Bombay and Hyderabad because Bombay was much ahead because the presidency was ruled by the British. I mean, universities there came up much before. No? That's why you have financial and other hubs here. So that's a different story. One cannot compare. You can compare, say, Vadodara, Mysore, and princely states with each other. But yeah, like to my understanding, Bangalore and Hyderabad had similar trajectories with only one major difference of Indian Institute of Science. Otherwise, they have the same kind of defense lab, same kind of institution building, same kind of support in the princely era, same kind of institution building in the 60s. But that one university made a big.
One observation is after the emergence of Telangana, there has been a tremendous development compared to whatever happened before. Would you agree to that? Because there has been a tremendous transformation in the last decade compared to whatever happened.
It's all, as they say, icing on the cake. The cake was built before. Because now it's an inflection point, you can go on expanding, you can go on creating new cities and all that.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was such a fascinating talk, and also this long duration of history, the ease with which you kind of narrate it, and to also acknowledge the context and historical context which we often tend to kind of forget. But I just want to ask a completely different question as a researcher and a writer. I mean, what are the challenges as a writer, and if you have some quick tips, because all of us struggle, particularly education institutions, master's students at one level, PhD students at the other. So, and you've been so prolific as a journalist, as an author of so many books. So, what is it, say, in your writing, or what would you, some tips, some ideas, something about your writing and your research, if you can share with us?
No, research is typical for this kind of thing. To look at the archives, to look at what has been written about before, or some books on Hyderabad. So archival research is important. National archives of India, the state archives are sometimes are very good archives. They have good collection. Accessing them is the problem. So Hyderabad, Telangana archives is hugely, it's a massive place, but accessing there it was a problem. But I'm sure it will be different in other states. Some state archives are very good, so don't ignore the archives. So that's one part. And of course, what also matters is when you talk about people, the oral history, I did about 100 interviews for this and meeting different people, but it's not oral history alone, it's not archive alone, but you need to build the whole story. I mean, talking of the research, there was one, JNU has this Center for Science Policy, so they had one PhD on genome banking. It was a massive, as you know, PhDs are, but I could not even find one line which I could cite in my research. So it was so theoretical. I mean, people are giving all framework, nothing can explain what happened in Genome Valley. Genome Valley first they went to Spanish University, obviously because they wanted it to be set up in a university. They said no, they went to University of Hyderabad because they had a land. So it would have been ideal that you have a Genome Valley set up in the university campus. So they said no. So finally they looked for a different model where they involved ICISI. Again a very novel thing. IKP, the ICISI Knowledge Park. It's a fascinating thing how ICISI used that, put that money. But it was getting this money from a German bank, development bank, and it was lending to Indian lenders at a higher rate of interest. So the German bank insisted that whatever you earn, use it for a philanthropic purpose. So that's how that ICICI extra interest which earned was put into creating this ICICI knowledge park. So see, the existing frameworks could not explain how genome has come about. So but this PhD went on and on with looking for some of those frameworks and apply them, that how their international connections, how their national connections, but nothing would explain how genome has come about. So sometimes you have to think, don't try to fit into what is there on the table, but maybe we can evolve some new models to explain. So what is happening in Hyderabad cannot be done. So many people have studied, Bhubaneswar wanted to study, they still keep coming, TF is there, this thing is there, so why not do it in our state? But you can't transplant something from one place to another. Similarly, existing frameworks will not explain everything. So I think we need to, so that's one thing that think out of the frameworks box. Yes. And of course, the usual research things apply that. Archival, oral history.
A little bit about your writing. What are the challenges? How do you manage? Is there a discipline involved? Is there a process involved?
No, there's no set process because I've been a professional writer, so my writing, style, way of presenting things would be totally different from some of your academic writers. Maybe but good at communication, but so that is a challenge I would say. But it is not necessary to use jargon at all. I mean, I've been a science writer, I've been talking to scientists and going, on this point again and again that if you are talking to somebody outside your field who could be a scientist in another field, for him it's a jargon what you're speaking. So if you want your words to communicate, your ideas to be communicated, you get out of the jargon. So that's not jargon, it's like the framework. When writing, you also don't use the jargon, that's one thing. And of course, things will change as you are writing. I had totally different ideas when I started working on this project. Because some things will always surprise you, and that's what you keep changing on the way.
Any other questions?
If there are no other questions, we would like to thank Dr. Dinesh. I mean, it was amazing to hear this brief history or long history briefly narrated. And I'm sure you have touched the chords both of any Telugus here and more of Marathis here. When you repeatedly quoted incidences, how institutions moved from Mumbai to I can resonate that kind of feeling here, and then the role of politicians and politics. I think that was very much evident, and it is very true that so many institutions are there in Hyderabad. I always wonder why NIRD has to be in Hyderabad and many other institutes that we always deal with. But then the availability of land because of this legacy, I think that's one of the answers. But I think political will and then that kind of a proactive nature of leaders, I think that has helped a lot in terms of this kind of success story of this city. So I would like to have some show of hands, any students from Hyderabad here?
Hyderabad connection.
Warangal, is it close by?
No, of course, it's
Hyderabad connection.
Otherwise, I would request Pakka Hyderabadi in audience, Lata, Professor Lata, to do a small honors for us. So this is a small memento from Sitara.
Okay.
It is from Hyderabad.
Okay. Very nice.
He is from Andhra.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much.
It is of Dasagara. Actually nice. Actually nice.
Over in Guntur.
So thank you so much again, and
Thank you. Thanks for the.